Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to push forward with this week's theme, exploring tracks with spectacular endings. This time we're going to be looking at a Sigur Rós track. This one is called
Ára Bátur.
which roughly translates to rowing boat. Now, this is a post-rock group, but oftentimes I'm given tracks from them that are outside of the typical rock instrumentation. I'm going to tell you, this one is already, I know it's a little bit past that. I haven't listened to it, but I have seen it while trying to get the volume normalized and all that jazz. And yeah, once again, we have a track that's a bit outside of rock's focus and explores the compositional side of post-rock in a different context. This was recorded at Abbey Road, and as you can kind of see right there at the bottom of the thumbnail, it says Hopelandic. I'm going to assume that most or all of the lyrics of this track are part of the made-up language of Hopelandic. Let's dive in and see what they're bringing to the table today.
Okay.
Oh, thanks for translating that for me.
Lést í hjarta mér og það varst þú sem andanna kveiktir inn í mér. Ég fór, þú fór. Þú rótar í tilfinningu í hræðir allt út allt. Það varst þú sem alltaf staða fyrir mann og það varst þú sem aldrei það sannur vinur mann. Ég fór, þú fór. I saw you. Þú siglir á fljótju yfir á gamlum ára sem skýtur
All right. So, yeah, it's post rock. Some of the simpler post rock, focusing entirely on a very minimal amount of composition executed in a way for maximum emotion. So, well, as far as the piano is concerned, they play four chords for the entire song. The rest of the orchestra colors that later on in the song, but up until like the 7 minute point, we had the strings come in to embellish on it, widening out the sound of it a couple of times throughout this track, but never recontextualizing it, continuing to lay into the exact same chords and emotions that the piano's laying into. And the piano pairs itself against the vocals often too, or maybe vice versa, however you want to look at that. The vocal melody, especially the higher pitched one, tends to mirror what the piano is doing. They hit the same key notes at the same times, and just further lean into this singular vision of progression and emotion. That's like 90% of the track right there. Not much more to dig into it. It means more on a emotional side, but from a technical angle, that's it. um, the last 10% of the track though explores something different. This is where all the texture recontextualization comes from. We have a growth of sound, of width, of body, of volume. Y'all felt that. This big crescendo towards the end of the track. All these instruments come in. It's a very full sound that almost, in fact, it does in some places overshadow the vocals. What were once the most dominant instrument in the mix is being drowned out by the sheer weight of everything else. For reason. I'm sure when we get into the lyrics it'll make sense, but this doesn't seem like an accidental thing or just something to do on a whim. Oh, wouldn't it be cool if the orchestra was louder than the vocals? Like, no, there's a meaning to it. I'm sure when we hit the lyrics it'll make sense. Um, but we have the volume, we have the size, so many more instruments. We have the strings, we have the brass, we have the timpani, we have the gong. We have the cymbals that come in. The choir, which we had a couple of times prior. Just, there's a lot of layers now. And so even if everybody was still playing quieter, the overall sound is still going to be bigger. It's taking what once was small and expanding it out almost infinitely, looking at the exact opposite side of the spectrum of the same idea. But we also change the coloring of it. Some of the instruments introduce new notes so that the original chord progression we go through is recontextualized through that. It expands on what that chord can tell. What it does is it takes something that is rather somber and turns it into something joyous. It gives us the other side of the coin. There is still a melancholy to it, but that's not what it is exclusively. And when paired with the larger sound, the many layers, just the bigness of the ending, it sort of feels like an attempt to take something that once was painful and find the silver lining through it. Find what there is to celebrate about it. And I am basing a little bit of that off of the opening lines in the lyrics. That I could be wrong. Maybe the lyrics go in a different direction. I stopped paying attention to them around the midpoint, which is kind of backwards, I suppose. Usually with slow burns, I pay attention to the music first and the lyrics second, but there's something about putting the lyrics on screen, it just hijacks my brain. It's why I try not to watch lyric videos too often because my brain will just hyper focus on it and go into poetic analysis mode, and I'm just not efficient at that to begin with. There's no processing power left to put towards music. So yeah, I guess that's my take on the song as a whole there. The one thing I want to bring up, which I probably have brought up in the past, is the lead singer's vocals. They're just gorgeous. They're pristine. His falsetto is full bodied. It's not airy at all. I don't know how he does it. It's a gorgeous tone that he can produce in those higher registers, and there's a timidness to it, but it's not ethereal. It's it's a palpable timidness. And there's so few vocalists I've heard that can pull that off. And he just makes it look so easy. Not even trying. His body language, his posture, he just looks so comfortable. Um, and it's just any sort of distress I see in his physicality, especially around the face, feels to me like exposing himself to the emotions of the moment more so than forcing this sound out of him. And yeah, I'm not a good singer to begin with, so like, I got a long way to go to hit that, but I'm still envious of it. His falsetto is just so good. Um, yeah, I'm gonna hit the lyrics here, and then I'm gonna circle back to the music and see how everything works together. Because I feel like this is a piece that it stands tallest when you understand the themes of it. And I've picked up on the emotional resonance in the music, and that's kind of all that's there. There's no technical prowess in here or anything like that. It's all about how you feel about it, and it's kind of generic in that we have somber music and then somber happy music, that bittersweetness, and that could represent so many things. So I think the lyrics are going to clue us into a lot. I'm curious what other people's interpretation of this is going to be. The way that I perceive it, it's vague enough to be interpreted in a few different ways, but I think regardless, the emotion is felt. There's three verses separated by a single line, I parted, you parted. And the third verse is surrounded by Hopelandic, which, as I mentioned, is just sort of it's not a real language. It doesn't have meaning. Yeah, it's well, okay, so it's a real language in that they speak it, but it's a made up language. um, and I don't believe there's any meaning to any of it. They just sing whatever syllable feels right in the moment. It's more of a contextual language. You're supposed to feel it more so than understand the words. You feel the flow and the harmony and the melody of it. But the first verse says, "You tried everything 1,000 times, experienced enough, been through enough, but it was you who let everything into my heart, and it was you who once again awoke my spirit." So there's this person in their life who tried everything they could, went through so much, and in the end, allowed this person to feel again, awoke their spirit, and allowed emotion into their heart. The second verse says, "You stir up emotions in a blender, everything in disarray. But it was you who was always there for me, and it was you who never judged, my true friend." This idea that when I'm around this person, things are kind of blurry. I don't know how to feel. I don't know how I should feel. Emotions just get stirred up. But regardless, you were always there for me. In my darkest times, no matter what I did, you stood by my side. Remember that both of these stanzas are ended with I parted, you parted. So we went our separate ways. Now, this third stanza is the one that sort of messes me up because the other two I think is fairly clear. It's about somebody who came into his life, showed him what living could be, stood by his side through thick and thin, and eventually they had to go their own ways. The idea that people come into your life changing you in ways that you could never imagine, but that most people end up having to take a path that's separate from yours. Or maybe you have to take a path that's separate than theirs. That no relationship is permanent. Lives take us in so many different places. But it's always good to remember the people for the good times, the ways that they changed us. And then we get to this third stanza, though. You sail on rivers with an old oar, leaking badly, you swim to shore. Pushed the waves away, but to no avail. You float on the sea, sleep on the surface, light through the fog. So when they were going their own way, their boat sank because it was an old boat. And they tried to swim back to shore, but the waves kept them out there. And so they float on the top of the surface of the sea, sleeping, acting as a light through the fog. At best, I could read this as this person is somebody who drifts from person to person, helping people how they can. They never stick around one place for too long, but they act as a light through the fog for anybody who has lost their way. That kind of idea. I don't know if that's a great read on it, but it does sort of showcase some level of bittersweet. I think the bittersweet works on the other two, though. And understanding that this person did so much for you, but that you ended up having to go your separate ways. You remember the good times, and you remember that they're not with you anymore. This last one, I don't know, it seems kind of weird. Especially since, at least from my perspective, the way that I read it, it reads as if this person lacks agency in their life. They just go wherever the world takes them, helping people along the way, which, who's going to help them? You can't be the rock forever. Eventually, you need somebody to be your stability. That's kind of a sad way for me to read that. And I think that works with some of the musical elements that are going on here, but I don't think that's the intended thematic tie. As usual, there is a possibility of a translational thing going on where maybe something gets lost in translation. Maybe the final stanza, this is a literal translation of it, but it's not necessarily carrying the ideas across. I don't know. That's always a possibility anytime we explore something that isn't originally in English and gets translated into English. But I don't know. Like I said, y'all let me know your interpretation of this. I mean, maybe for most of you, just the feeling of the song is more than enough. The lyrics, you don't even need to know what they're about. You were there on the ride, you got misty eyed there at the end, and that was more than enough to be emotionally engaged with it. Those are my thoughts, though, on this track by Sigur Rós. Again, I tried to pronounce the name of it a couple of times, and it was just so bad. It was such an American way of pronouncing those Icelandic syllables. I don't want to butcher it. But yeah, give me your thoughts, perspectives, opinions, any of that stuff in the comment section. Let me know if you think I was right about stuff, wrong about stuff. Lay into me. Or let me have it, or whatever. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you to this menu right here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. greatly appreciate all 3 of those. We do have a special selection coming up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.